Some people call maple syrup liquid gold, and they think that putting it on pancakes and waffles is an idea that's pure gold. Well, at Miles Franklin, we think a pure gold idea is taking real liquid gold and turning it into real solid gold Canadian maple leaf coins. That's why right now, for a limited time, we're offering the purest gold Canadian maple leaf coins at just $105 US over spot. That's 4 nines of the purest gold there is in a pretty maple leaf design. And at only $105 US over spot, we'd say that's an idea that's pure gold.
Call me directly at 419-819-9209 or my associate at 310-562-6400 or email us at kaiser@milesfranklin.com.
If the swamp can steal a national election, what hope do we have that the swamp is actually going to ever come to grips with reforming the COMEX and reforming the manipulation? What we're witnessing is perhaps the greatest travesty in the history of democracy. And we're going to get into this when we talk about Jefferson. So the history of England, the history of America has been securing rights through violence. Now, since Gandhi and since Martin Luther King, there's been a doctrine in the Western world that we don't settle disputes or political grievances through violence. It must be through non-violent means. So how do you do that? It's through political participation, whether it's about actually engaging the political process like I did on the cash transaction ban, whether it's utilizing the courts, or whether it is actually voting a government out that you don't agree with. And obviously, if they can manipulate election outcomes through breaches of state law, the Constitution, or whether it's through some of these Dominion voting machines, how can you actually change public policy if you can't change the government or if you can't actually speak out? And obviously, big tech censorship is a huge issue that is so key to the founding of America. America's supreme document is not the Constitution, it's the Declaration of Independence, and you have God-given rights which sit above the Constitution, and you have the right to revolution if the government doesn't actually adhere to protecting those rights. That is the essence of America.
Remember, the silver market represents 0.02% of the entire financial markets. So, which is astounding to me if you think back to like 1900, which is, I know, 120 years ago, and I'm not that old. I'm old, not as old as the dinosaurs, but nonetheless, 1900 isn't all that long ago. And everyone, money was silver. It was silver in your pocket. So everyone, basically, more or less, was on the silver standard. And now 120 years later, and that would represent basically the money supply, the base money supply, the real money supply, the in your pocket money supply. Now it's 0.02% because it's not money anymore in most people's minds, in the cognitive map and the way you think. So I think that as more people become aware of it, and that goes to 0.04% or 0.2%, a tenfold increase, you will see a move into silver like you've never seen before, because it's a global phenomenon now. And there will be everybody on the planet, more or less, that will be seeking some type of asset class other than food, which will be number one, that they'll be flocking to preserve any purchasing power. And this is a race against the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, where the nation states will edict that you are now on their system, and that's the only system that's viable for transacting business.
And what people say is, well, there's not enough gold to have a gold standard because, the commerce, maybe there was once upon a time, but commerce and banking and lending and leverage are all so great, there's not enough gold to support the global economy. That's nonsense. There's always enough gold. It's just a question of price. Now, at, say, $2,000 an ounce, no, you'd have to reduce the money supply by 80%. It would cause the worst depression in the history of the world. That doesn't work. But if you price gold at some other number, some implied non-deflationary price, and stick to it, then you can go back to a gold standard. So what's that price? So just do the math. What price would gold have to be for 33,000 tons to be worth $12 trillion? Well, the answer is $15,000 an ounce. So it's going to get there one way or the other.
So when cash leaves the debt market, 10-year yield rises in a controlled fashion right now, and it looks for places to go, stock market. But when it rises in an uncontrolled fashion, oh, it's going to get dumped. Everything is going to get dumped at the same time. Cash is going to start to move big time, and that's when we get the inflationary period. And it has the potential to be really incredible. And it's going to be rapid too. People must be ready for it because it's going to happen at a time that they choose. We have no say-so in anything anymore, government and anything. It's all them. It's all by design. The shadow government is the central banks. They dictate the rules. They buy our politicians. They're all paid off. We're in a full-blown debt crisis right now. How do we know that? Because the Fed's in here buying it all. We heard from the Fed again. They're prepared to buy even more. But no one bats an eye. No one says, they're going to buy more. How are they going to do that? Where are they getting the cash from? We need to understand what's happening here. Then I started to see what's going on with the TAR program and the Wall Street bailouts. It's like, oh, no. This is much bigger. And what's coming down the pike is going to end up being much bigger. And that's what I've been trying to warn people about. The 2008 event died. This whole financial system died in 2008. It's been on life support since that time. So you can go right to the Federal Reserve's website and look at their balance sheet. And you can see over the past X amount of months, it's gone parabolic. It's literally gone straight up. And as long as that mechanism keeps going, and not only does it have to keep on going, I think something else that people need to know is debt acquisition and debt issuance must increase exponentially. It can't just stay static like on a line. It's got to literally go up on a hockey stick. And that's right now we're in that hockey stick phase. So you have to realize this hockey stick phase can't really continue. I mean, it could continue for a while, and I think it's going to, until they're done. And I don't know when that's going to be, but we need to be aware, not afraid, but be aware that it's coming. This is why people like you and me have been saying, own gold, own silver, own platinum, own palladium, hard assets that you can hold in your hand, because at least from a financial standpoint, we can get ourselves in the right spot.
Here are all these mechanisms which are supposed to protect the average Joe. And what we've seen here in a critical situation, because the election of the president is obviously a critical situation. In this critical situation, all of the checks and balances have failed. And the people who are now going to be in control, apparently, they're telling us that anyone who criticizes this is somehow a bad actor. And their allies in the social tech world and the corporate world are telling us that you're not going to be able to speak, at least on these various platforms. We're going to shut you down. The point is we've gone that full step. The government has failed. These structures have been set up to control thought and belief. And apparently there's no way that the government is going to control them. And then the average person has no recourse.
If you don't have free speech, you don't think. If you don't have debate, you don't think. If you just have fist fights, you know what that says? You're not thinking. And they love that. I mean, listen, go back to all the regimes in the past. They have always used these things to concentrate power, and power has not concentrated. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a constitutional lawyer of over 40 years. I've sued in and out of Washington, D.C., and this is one of the most frightening aspects I've ever seen about our republic, what's happening.
To have a deficit of $5.3 trillion is like 25% of GDP. I mean, this is absolutely massive. And it is a continuance of something that I've said in the past, and that is that the American government is already stuck on a hyperinflationary course. And by that, I mean that the only way in which they can finance themselves is by printing money. There is no escape, I think, for the American government from that dilemma. The point that's interesting to me is at what point in this situation where we have already got, under the Chapwood Index, a rate of inflation of approximately 10%, compared with the CPI's 1.7%, at what point are people going to suddenly realize, hold on a minute, this 1.7%, or let's say it rises to 2.2%, is a load of absolute hogwash, and they then don't believe it. To me, it is remarkable that people within the system, investment managers, investment strategists, economists, and all the rest of it, don't understand that the CPI is deliberately suppressing the numbers, and therefore the whole of the financial system is completely mispriced. Nobody seems to understand this. They don't want to look at it. Everybody needs the dollar. There will come a point where suddenly they don't need the dollar, and then you're in trouble. And this is roughly where America seems to be now. And it's made particularly more acute at a time when the rate of monetary inflation is about to accelerate very substantially.
Fiat currencies are backed by nothing, but they also have no limit to the number that can be printed. And so literally, a handful of individuals can get together and just decide to increase the broad money supply by 25% year over year. And all the participants that own that currency have no say in that.
You have 5% nominal GDP in a world where you have a 1% 10-year treasury note. And the only buyer, the really indiscriminate $120 billion a month buyer of mortgage-backed securities and treasuries, so they're doing $80 billion of treasuries a month, 40 of mortgage-backed securities. When that buyer steps away, you have the potential of a slingshot higher in yields temporarily. That'll crash the stock market. Then everything will, implode on itself, and the yields will start heading back down. I don't want to be a part of that.
We are living in the age of deception and betrayal. And if people adjust their investing portfolio, their lifestyle, and the locale that they choose to live based on the recognition of that fact, they will be in a far, far better place and statistically have a far, far better chance of survival than the average American. So again, we are living in the age of deception and betrayal. Plan accordingly, invest accordingly, relocate accordingly.
The market dropped something like 40-some points. I went in and I bought that happily, and it was up the next day. It was up the full 40 plus another 15 points. So, this is the way you can kind of fine-tune your purchasing, but you have to think a little differently than the rest of the herd if you don't want to step in what it leaves behind.
The stock market has been on fire for the last several years, and many people think that's because we have a great economy. It's quite the opposite. When you stuff trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy, Dunnigan, where is it going to go but the Wall Street casino, right? It's not going to go to the 0% interest rate bonds. It's been incredible from the stock market, from the cryptocurrencies, all of these different things. Gold and silver did well. And we think going forward that taking care of your family, taking care of those you love, taking care of your own future, financial future, and spending less time and energy worrying about Trump's future, spending less time and energy worrying about Pelosi's future, spending less time and energy about which news organization is lying to you less. These are dead issues. We don't have any time for this. We have to protect our families. We have to protect ourselves.
We had more attention to silver in 2 days, honestly, than I've had in 20 years. I mean, it just came all at once. It was because of this Reddit crowd and the internet fervor over these different commodity accounts, and people were making so much money so fast. I mean, my niece, who had never traded before, has now traded 2 of these stocks within 2 or 3 days and make 400% on her money. So all of a sudden, the attention went to silver, and of course, the short position that God has been trying to expose for many years and what was going on, and all of a sudden it was such a big deal. It caught everyone's attention, and I was as busy as you were, and it was just numbing. And then, of course, silver took off, and then Sunday night, Monday, but J.P. Morgan stopped it at 30. This is like they've been stopping it for years, and they've calmed the things down. And a couple of days ago, it was back to where it started versus all these other stocks were still up way beyond where they took off. In my opinion, because I've been on this stuff for a long time, that there's a massive short position out there, that it really has helped the way these Reddit crowd people have focused in on it, even though God has spent 20 years trying to expose it and the mainstream press won't touch it. And yes, they got it back down, but I think the difference is this particular commodity really is in short supply. It's been suppressed. There's very short supplies in London and the United States. And I think it's going to take off again and gain more attention from the same crowd and bring in the big money.
And they invented, in a sense, in a broad sense, what's a new fundamental, which is to say, if you find an asset class, even if it's legitimately overvalued, where the short position is too extraordinary to cover, if you collectively buy up the float, so there's no stock available to cover, you can do some truly odd things to those who are short. I remember Ian McAvity describing being on the wrong side of a short squeeze as being a truly religious experience. And certainly the people who were short GameStop learned that to their disadvantage. It is arguable that the silver futures market may be the most overshorted market in the planet.
The busiest few days I've ever experienced in 30 years, really. So I'm sure you experienced that as well. Yeah, the Wall Street Silver Reddit group was fascinating. The whole movement is fascinating to me. And it's really been very enlightening to me to see what this millennial group, they're very industrious, they're very shrewd, they work well together, and they've created an impact. They have really woke people up across the gamut. Even people who aren't even into precious metals have been awoken, I think, by what the market is really all about, that it resembles more of a casino where the rules favor the house versus the little guy. And I think that unintended consequence is going to have a profound effect moving forward with the way things are. Look, you have this entire group that has shown a light upon what can happen if the group mentality attacks an inequity. In the case of GameStop, a stock that was heavily shorted with a low flow, and they came in and took advantage of it. And the part that I think the unintended consequence comes into play is what the reaction of the exchanges to mitigate or limit the ability to seize it by saying you can only buy one share or halting trading or whatever it may be. It has created an awakening, I think. And I'm very impressed by these folks. And they certainly understand silver. And I think where they're getting short sold is that they're not trying to buy this pump and dump it. I think they really understand the fundamental reasons to own it and realize that it is massively undervalued and it should be a part of everyone's asset portfolio, not just accumulated, ridden up, squeezing the shorts, and then dumping, making a profit. I think it's a little bit different in this case, and it's fundamentally changing the landscape of this industry, and it's happening rapidly.
Here's what I think is going to happen. You're going to have at some point around, let's just say June. Don't hold me to that date because it could be July, it could be August, it could be May. I don't know. May, maybe. So what you're going to see is the peak of growth and inflation around that time. And then you're going to see what is going to be a massive fiscal and monetary cliff occurring. So I'm predicting a super spike in interest rates because along with that growth and inflation, you're going to see the 10-year note yield approach 2%. 2%. That's going to scare the stock market. You might see an absolute plunge in stock prices around that time. And that fear is going to come exactly at the same time that there'll be no more trillions of dollars in fiscal stimulus.
Real estate, you may get a few percent per year. The stock market's already at an all-time high. So where is the next big opportunity where you can make instant wealth? It's in a manipulated market that the price heads towards equilibrium. And obviously, kind of like with palladium, it went up 400% in short order. And silver has that potential to go much more than palladium because it is the most manipulated market in the world.
The suppression story is getting more and more difficult for the authorities to continue with gold because the bullion banks are horribly short of gold contracts on COMEX, and there's no liquidity in London. They may get a little bit of temporary liquidity in London through central bank leasing, and I suspect that's been going on. In fact, we did see that when gold peaked up at over 2,000 in August last year, when GLD announced that some of its gold was being stored in the Bank of England. Now, that can only be because that is leased gold. In other words, the gold in the Bank of England has got two owners. When the dollar fails, and I'm saying when, not if, when the dollar fails, you're going to have the strategic issues of handing enormous power to China and Russia merely by allowing gold to be adopted, if you like, as the sheet anchor behind the new currency arrangements. And that is going to be very difficult, I think, for America. But she's going to have to bite the bullet on it. I'm afraid she's got no alternative.
Tesla didn't get to be Tesla, and Apple and Samsung didn't get to be Apple and Samsung by being naive and stupid. So they wouldn't just go in and announce, hey, we're going to buy all this, and here's $20 billion, get me what I can. They would slowly, through multiple sources, retaining anonymity, under fear of death. If you say a word, we will cut your contract and never work with you again. We do not want anyone to know that we're doing this. That's how they would possibly do it, I would think. And quietly accumulate 10 bars a week, 20 bars a week. And, oh, you got 10,000 this week. And 20, I mean, it adds up. If you do it all at once, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Or if you're the commercial banks, you dump it all at once in a drive-by shooting effect to freak people out right when you have all of a sudden 8 million Reddit people looking at the silver market. It was done for effect.
I've been with enough powerful people to know they know stuff. They know stuff. There's an agenda somewhere. And so what it says to me is, to the average person, man, we don't know what's coming down the pike. You better get your food security lined up, whether it's a direct line to a farmer that you know, or some backyard raised beds and some chickens, a little bit of skill, a little bit of experience, hook up with some homesteaders and some neighbors and some friends and get a loose-knit group of collaborating folks who know how to grow stuff, build stuff, and fix stuff, so that I think that thinking people right now, a lot of us are trying to minimize our dependency and engagement with things that can hurt us. Tell me what would not give the enemies of this country more aid and comfort than to realize that fundamental part of our federal defense system is being destroyed from within. We need to use the reserve powers of the states because Congress is not going to do this. Congress is wedded to the Federal Reserve System, and Congress is wedded to not use gold and silver as normal day-to-day currency. It's out there, and people buy it, and they put it in safe deposit boxes, right? But they're not paying their debts with it. Congress is not interested in that. The states have the authority to make that system available. And then we see what happens.
The biggest money in the world is not driving down the price just for kicks and giggles. They're doing it specifically, I believe, to corner the physical supply. And look at what these big traders are doing. If you look at the gold market as an example, they drove the price down into the 1750s and then took massive possession off of COMEX. They're using the lowered prices to accumulate huge amounts of gold and silver. It is incentivizing them to take delivery of it. The mints cannot keep up with demand. And I have been told by a relatively reliable source, we're one of only 27 authorized resellers in the world for the United States Mint. So I have some pretty good sources. This hasn't been validated or verified, but I would say it's a very good source who told me the U.S. Mint is planning on going offline for up to 2 months in April. Offline completely to retool for the new Type 2 Eagle series. My question to him was, why the heck would they do that? It made no sense to any of us why they would do this instead of just finding a way to retool for, on the fly. So you pull out the U.S. Mint as an example, if that were to happen, for 2 months, you've just cut off 20% of global supply.
When monetary affairs get completely unhinged and run completely amok, that's what happens to your currency. And one of the telltales and one of the harbingers that you're approaching a time when money is devalued in that fashion historically has been a surging price of gold and silver. And it seems to me, at least, that the powers that be are doing everything they can to make sure that the precious metals are not viewed in that light.
The people were desperate. I mean, basically, what happens with inflation, that sort of price inflation, is that people end up starving. And when you get the middle class is just completely impoverished, what do? I mean, they probably try and leave the country and go somewhere else. That's not going to be an option in a worldwide, let's say, a dollar-led collapse of fiat currencies. But you can see how effectively a sort of hyperinflation allows outsiders to come in and basically rob the population of their property. So what we're talking about is not a pleasant experience. It really is not. It's going to be very nasty. It will be just okay for those who have protected themselves with the ownership of some gold and silver. And I'm talking physical, I'm not talking about paper. And then you've got a problem, of course, you've got the security issues and all the rest of it. It's not an easy thing that we're talking about. This is something which actually is quite difficult, and people need to think through what they're actually doing, place some sort of assessment on whether, someone like me who says, we're facing the end of paper currencies, is actually credible and what he's saying is credible. And then work out, okay, what's going to be our insurance just in case McLeod is right?
It's a movement, crazy as it is, to go down this path. And that's going to require a bunch more metal, a bunch more silver, and a bunch more copper. And the miners just simply don't have the capacity to supply. The politicians are telling people that the direction they want to go.
So when I've had people call me up and say, okay, I've got unallocated, and I've had some small clients, I've had clients who have owned tons of unallocated gold or silver at various institutions in Australia. And I've said to these guys, so what do you actually own? And so when you think about ownership, it's legal title. What is your legal property? And so when you, for example, buy a kilo of silver from As Good as Gold or from Miles Franklin and you get it, that bar of silver is your physical legal property. You have legal title to that property. But when you buy unallocated, you don't technically own anything. What you've effectively bought is a promissory note from a counterparty that, as the price fluctuates, you will enjoy the benefit of that fluctuation. If you wish to convert from this synthetic to physical, you have to pay an additional fee, and we'll be able to come up with it. But in essence, you have bought a promissory note from a counterparty that, A, if the price goes ballistic, they're going to give you the requisite fiat currency dollars back. And two, if you do want to convert to physical, that they're going to have the requisite silver or gold to be able to borrow it for you so that you actually have the physical. And I can tell you there is a very big scandal/problem in the Australian market. The Perth Mint has run dry of silver. So I was hearing a direct report from eyewitnesses in late February, people walking into the Perth Mint in Perth in Western Australia, and they were being told no silver for sale to the general public. Now, what I can tell is that starting at the beginning of March, to accredited, approved distributors for the Perth Mint, they cannot place an order on the Perth Mint for silver. So when I was told this by people in the industry, I said, well, for example, does the size of the order matter? So if you're a $10 million client versus a $1,000 client, if you have a big order, will that size of order give you priority in the queue? And I've been told it doesn't matter what size order you come up with since the beginning of March, Perth Mint cannot deliver. Now, they have some supply chain problems. I was given some insight into what that are. I can't go into more detail, but they are struggling to source enough silver to meet up with demand. But the big danger is if you have unallocated at the Perth Mint and you wanted to convert to physical today, you can't do it.
One thing I've learned in economics is never, ever underestimate the ability of self-serving governments to kick problems down the road instead of solve them. I mean, this problem has fundamentally come about because the governments of the world have run unsustainable deficits and have built up unrepayable debts, and they are trying to monetize those debts. So if the question is, when is this problem going to stop? When are governments going to stop spending more money than they take in revenue? When are they going to stop printing new dollars? It could go on for a really long period of time. They could keep interest rates very, very low for the rest of my career. Talking about whether commodity prices are manipulated and the trading and COMEX and all those types of things, I would say that, so I've recently been added to the board of the World Gold Forum, and I would say that it's very much on our attention and on our radar, understanding and changing how gold is traded around the world. And I would say stay tuned over the next number of years, because I think you're going to see a lot of structural changes that way.
If you ever are going to take possession of your metal, period, whatever account you're in, whether it be the Perth Mint or it be an IRA, you want segregated in your name. You get what you pay for, because when the chips are down and you need to take possession, whether it be for an emergency that everyone equates and associates gold with, or an opportunity, you want to get your stuff.
Palladium, platinum, and rhodium, actually. Rhodium's at over $20,000 an ounce. That's the Brazilian project, which we're really focusing our exploration on. And as those contrarian investors might like, we've got this asset that's also on the shelf and ready to roll when uranium prices move higher, which they have not yet, but there's significant interest in the capital markets for uranium projects. So we'll look to be opportunistic there.
I remember Rick Rule's comment about uranium. He said he really has an eye on it. He favors it for the long term, and he says you have to be willing to be wrong for a while before you're going to be right. But when you're right because you've positioned yourself in the right place, then it can really make a huge value proposition. And he expects that going forward. So other people have gotten weary of that, but he, as a contrarian, is positioning himself to be ready for that. And it sounds like Valor was intrinsically positioned there and remains having that resource.
We paid for that over 1 decade of being wrong. We're right too early. A decade early is pretty painful, but sort of new investors coming in get the benefit of that.
Yeah.
Without all the pain and the waiting. But, I'm not chasing uranium assets right now. I have a fabulous uranium asset. And when the price does move, we are perfectly positioned to take advantage.
Yeah, that reminds a lot of our viewers of how a lot of us feel who started stacking precious metals in late 2011, early 2012, and have been basically underwater for a decade. It's good, though, to realize you're in the right place. We have a saying in the preparedness community, I'd rather be 7 years early than 1 day late.
The idea about inflation that most people don't understand is it steals from them insidiously. It steals from them at every level, every purchase they make, every bill they pay, every dollar they save. Part of that's being stolen from them. Let's say silver is at 28 and you sold it 10 times more than the client has purchased. That's not a hedge. That is not a hedge. So when the Reddit group got enthused about the silver story and started buying physical, and I hope they continue, we saw some of the ETFs change their prospectuses. Well, if they were truly neutral, as they should be, there wouldn't be any problem. I mean, they're basically a stock. You're buying a stock.
Today, look what they're doing. They have us locked in our houses. We can't go anywhere. We can't shake hands with anyone. You can't get close to anybody. You think this is by accident too? Of course not. Of course not. They don't want you interacting with people. They realize that there's power in that. If people got together and they started talking and interacting with like-minded people, it gives them power. They want to take that power away. They want to control you. This is so much bigger than people actually think it is. So we got to start realizing that we mean something to each other. We're important to each other. We need each other, all of us. And they don't want us to know that, because if we did, we'd gain strength, and they don't want us to have that strength.
If you get hyperinflation of the money supply, there is no way there's anything deflationary going on. The business is going bust, but that's not deflation. People are going bust in a hyperinflationary environment simply because the government is taking money away from the economy by money printing. It is transferring wealth from the producers in the economy to itself. Does that describe what's going on in America? I reckon it's a pretty close fit. It's not just the Fed, it's other central banks. And the bubble is absolutely everywhere. Every stock, every corporate loan. I mean, the bond markets are in a bubble price-wise, because they are completely at the wrong price. So you can see that when this goes, it will probably take the dollar with it. It'll almost certainly take the dollar with it. And it could be that we wake up one morning and find the world has just completely changed. And if you don't have any gold at that stage, you probably missed the.
I have a problem with a master orchestrator in the 15 or 12 people that vote on the FOMC, that they actually know the right cost of interest rates. They don't, and they cause massive problems in the economy. But they actually serve to price out renters from the real estate market once again. It's one of those, unintended consequences. They say, Well, we're going to take interest rates to 0% to save the economy because the economy can't function in a free market capacity, which is completely anti-capitalist done again in nature. I mean, the market, the beautiful thing about the market is millions of people voting every day, having the power and the freedom to decide what the cost is and of everything, especially the price of money. You know, savers and investors, that dynamic is completely obliterated. And so the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And here's one great example.
We will expose the true mismatch between how much future electronic contracts there are versus how much physical. And once that point of truth is reached, that's where people talk about the moonshot. People talk about $50 silver, $100 silver, 200. I think Keith Neumeyer says 200. Other people saying, I think David Morgan put out a tweet saying $400 per ounce, etc. So when people talk about a sky high in the price, we're talking about that point of truth between reconciling how many electronic contracts versus how much physical silver there is, and that point of truth will demonstrate that we're potentially dealing with the largest financial fraud in the history of financial markets.
Some people call maple syrup liquid gold, and they think that putting it on pancakes and waffles is an idea that's pure gold. Well, at Miles Franklin, we think a pure gold idea is taking real liquid gold and turning it into real solid gold Canadian maple leaf coins. That's why right now, for a limited time, we're offering the purest gold Canadian maple leaf coins at just $105 US over spot. That's 4 nines of the purest gold there is in a pretty maple leaf design. And at only $105 US over spot, we'd say that's an idea that's pure gold.
This is Donegan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver dealer with Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized, private service from one of the oldest and best respected companies in the business. 30 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded, insured delivery or vault storage or IRAs, excellent prices, privacy and confidentiality, pay by check, money order, ACH or wire, satisfaction guaranteed. Call me directly at 419-819-9209 or my associate at 310-562-6400 or email us at kaiser@milesfranklin.com.